she's been working with refugees, and she is doing lots of cool stuff. I mean, the focus is yoga for refugees and refugee children being a big focus. And I know that you managed to sneak into UNHCR recently, so I'd love to hear more about that. And I kind of snuck out and just sneaked in to replace me, right? And it's been 2 years since I spoke at the UNHCR plenary, but today, like, this is the anniversary. So Danielle, I'm keeping the introductions really short. So please introduce yourself. Your work is amazing, and I think the world should hear about it. And feel free to stretch a session to have you a full 20 minutes.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Marcelo. Pleased to be here. And I just wanted to tell Mo, I was able to hear the tail end of your presentation. I wish I had logged in earlier. It sounds fascinating. So I hope to meet you someday.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Okay, well, hello, everyone. So I'm Danielle De La Fuente, and I wanted to talk today a little bit about finding your passion and following your dreams, and perhaps how that doesn't necessarily always is a linear line. And so I wanted to share my story of how, what I used to do, and then how it kind of led to create my organization and what I'm currently doing. So I started my career around your age. I wanted to be an ambassador. So I started my career working in embassies, and that quickly led to working for the US Department of Defense and fostering relationships with the Middle East and US government. I used to make a joke that I was like eHarmony for policy, bringing countries together and talking about water security or energy security. But really what I was doing was peace building and introducing these very, very complex themes in an arena where people could talk and form solutions. And I would do that with a very high level of ambassadors and generals and the such. But I always wanted to work with kids. And so I found an opportunity to go back to school and do a master's in peace and conflict studies. And I honed in on what is intergenerational trauma and that whole role that memory has on the next generation of violence, of reoccurring patterns of poverty, etc. And so I noticed that, when you have, a war, conflict, and now you have peace, oftentimes that trauma issue is not really addressed. And so all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, well, everyone's back to normal. Well, you can't neglect the fact that there has been tremendous hurt on both sides, that, there may have been sexual abuse, there's grief, there's death, etc. And especially that sort of trauma permeates the society and could lead to all sorts of different issues. And so I thought, I'm a kids yoga teacher on the side, and in the States, it's a very, very much started to get integrated into schools. It's used for what is called social emotional learning. It's a really wonderful method. And I kept thinking, well, if it works so well, in a Western setting, why wouldn't this work in a crisis setting? Why wouldn't it work in, an emergency setting? And so I was in Greece doing a teacher training for yoga. And all of a sudden I thought, well, why not go, speak to the kids? I've not been a refugee. I've not lived through war. So who am I to tell someone what I think is best for their future? And I spent weeks on the islands just chatting with children. I'm fortunate to speak several languages, but also because of their very interesting journeys, they had picked up words along the way, and somehow we managed to communicate very, very beautifully. And so I'm going to share a few slides just so you can kind of follow me on this journey. So one second, let me see how I can share my screen. Wait, here we go. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let me kind of just fast forward here. So I was visiting refugee camps, and I want to show some of these pictures because as it isn't the the norm to go visit refugee camps, I wanted to kind of bring you along with me. So this is in Lebanon, very close to Syria actually. And these are some camps in Greece. So on the left, this is in Chios Island. On the right, also in Chios Island, below in Lebanon. And I think that's all I have for camp pictures, but so maybe I'll stop sharing for now. But I wanted you to get a sense of where I was. So you can see there's extreme poverty. people are living in these very, very small tents or containers. And, you know, their human dignity is in essence really being violated because no one should be living like this. But the more I spoke to the kids, it was so obvious that what they were lacking was that social connectedness, that aspect of wanting to go to school, to see your friends, to learn from each other. And I was talking to very small kids, so to play, you know, just to be a child. And so what we did was we decided to just basically build on those strengths. So I went back to the drawing board and I called every expert imaginable that I knew, that whether they were a kids yoga teacher, a mindfulness expert, or a dance instructor, they were working in all these great fields. And I said, look, you do dance well, or you do mindfulness well, or you do, you know, art therapy really well. Why don't we bring this together and look at the entire evolution and social development of the child? So actually, I'm gonna kind of go back to the slides because maybe I'll give you some visuals too. No, maybe not. Okay, hold on a second. Here we go. So what we did is we created 4 pillars of support. And so we have social emotional learning, and I'll touch upon that in a little bit further in depth. And then you have early childhood development. So those are your most formative years. So that 0 to 8 years old, when your brain's developing, you're developing entirely. And then psychosocial support. So making sure that you have that mind, body, balance, etc., and peace building. And we housed this in what we call our rainbow of education. And it's called a rainbow of education because it's for kids. So imagine a rainbow, and every color corresponds to a theme. So for instance, red is emotions, and green is compassion, and blue is empathy. And all of these are your foundational social emotional skills. And so when I say that, for instance, you know, let's just go with emotions. You know, it's oftentimes very difficult to articulate what you're feeling. So if I were to ask you, you know, what you're feeling right now, most people usually go with happy, sad. They don't tap into the wide range of emotions. But even being able to articulate how you're feeling automatically makes it so much easier to then balance and regulate what you're feeling. So let's say that you're feeling angry and frustrated. Well, that's okay. But it's knowing how to deal with that anger and that frustration and how to channel it in a positive and effective way, which is where sort of we come in. We teach those skills. So we do this through trauma-informed play-based learning, where we use many of those modalities that I already mentioned. So kids yoga and mindfulness, dance, play, art therapy, reading, writing, and we teach those fundamental skills. We work in Greece, Lebanon, and Turkey at the moment. We've already trained 74 teachers, and we work in 7 child-friendly safe spaces and have reached approximately 1,100 kids. We just turned 3, so you know, this is quite a lot for a toddler organization. And our model is really made on sustainability. Because I think one of the worst things you can do is kind of go and give aid and then leave. So we really wanted to empower people on the ground. So we train individuals from the community. So a lot of women from the refugee community. We train local organizations that are often very, very small and might not have access to curriculum such as ours. And then together we transform lives. So we train them, we give them the curriculum, we give them the supplies, and then they impart and teach the children. So I'm going to play this little video just so you can kind of see it in action. Did that play? I just want to make sure it played. Yes? No?
Yeah, played.
Yes.
Yes, it played.
So going back to what Marcelo was saying about UNHCR, what makes us really unique was last year, they had a massive global refugee forum. It was an inaugural forum, and our model was named one of the most promising practices, which is a huge compliment, because out of, all the organizations, only 2 were selected. And we were chosen in this because it was really a very holistic practice that combined all different aspects of development and psychosocial support. So really, really unique approach. And the fact that we were able to build on the community strengths so that we could empower them to make it very sustainable, also very unique. And we're rooted in the spirit of collaboration. So, oftentimes many organizations compete with each other. But the way I envision things is if we work together, we're going to get there faster. So, let's build on each other's strengths and make sure that we can impact in a very meaningful way. So I won't go into, I can talk about coronavirus in a bit, but basically the reason I share this story is because, looking back at when I was a teenager and wanting to be an ambassador, well, it's a little bit different than now working with refugees and working specifically in early childhood development and making sure that they're, emotionally well, etc. So it's not a very linear line, as I was saying. But I feel like over time, if you really look back, a lot of what I was doing at a government level with many countries was very much what I'm doing with children, but I'm now packaging it into a very playful and fun manner. But at the same time, I'm still teaching those conflict resolution skills, how to, prevent conflict, how to avoid it, how to manage your own self reactions, and, be aware of how that feeds into the social aspect. So I think Corona has been a really interesting time for us all just to reflect, because now I feel that most people understand that their own actions really do have consequences to others in their community. So just the whole, social distancing aspect. Well, yes, you want to wear your mask and you want to social distance because you're trying to, do this for the better of the whole. And so, when you start your career, when you start working, you're going to find so many things that you're really passionate and drive you. And the best thing I can tell you is to be open to explore all of them, because you never know where one door is going to open and it's going to lead you to, and it could lead you into the opportunity of a lifetime, something that you truly enjoy. The fact that I'm able to do something that I love and help people at the same time is something I could have never dreamed of, or maybe I didn't even think about earlier on. And so, but then also, I realized I was really good at it. I'm very good at working with kids. And so tapping into that and seeing how I could bring in, my experience with peace building or my experience with international relations, and, bringing those different cultures and combining them was a way to explore that about myself, but also, do something new. And Marcelo, I know that we're supposed to talk for like 20 minutes and then questions, but I kind of wanted to make it a little bit more interactive. Is that okay?
Of course, it's your session. So it's like, as I usually say, it's like being a housewarming party. You just have a circle of younger people around you and you're telling them stories. So you decide what you want to do. Just have some hard stops, so say another 5 minutes, and then they will go to the play break, but you're welcome to join them there as well. But 5 minutes of questions is totally okay.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, I wanted actually all of us to take a few breaths, because breath work is so important, and especially it's the easiest way to relax the nervous system. And I'm going to teach you actually the kids' breaths because they're very fun. So when I speak about breath, obviously we all know how to breathe because we're living beings, but you really want to breathe from your belly. And so when you're feeling very, very frustrated, nervous. I get very nervous when I speak in public. I take breaths. So you really want to kind of breathe in from your belly, not so much from your lungs. And so, one thing that is a lot of fun with kids, especially, is to make, animal breaths or the such. So we like to do our sort of like lion's breaths, where you like breathe in and and you roar it out, or something of the sort. So today I wanted to breathe like superheroes, because I really think everyone has an inner superhero, and that can come out. And so if you kind of just make your little spider web, because we're going to breathe like Spider-Man, you're going to breathe in your breath and then send it out. Send it out. So really breathe in the breath and send it out. So, you know, you can make breathing fun, but the reason I want to talk about breath work is because it's so critical, especially in times right now where it's really challenging, that you're just, you know, confused, scared, anxious. Take a few moments, take a breath, take 3 with 3 or 4 breaths, make it fun, envision something, you know, use your imagination, use your creativity, and then come back. And I kind of just want to get a feeling of where is everyone, you know, how is everyone feeling throughout this pandemic? I mean, if you guys can at least type it into the chat box or just unmute and just give me a sense of how you're feeling.
You know, I'm feeling pretty good actually, because at the start it was a bit stressful and all of that with school. But as the time goes, everything becomes easy and not too bad. It's the normal life now, I guess.
Okay. You have a very hopeful approach. I love it.
Yeah.
For me, it wasn't too bad. I mean, I'm taking city college classes right now, so I guess I have a lot of work. But apart from that, it's not that bad.
Okay. Anyone else?
Me too. I feel very peaceful. You know, I talk with my father, my mother, and my sister a lot, and the only thing is my friends. Only thing that I miss, but I can deal with it. And anyway, to come back.
Well, this is a very hopeful group, which is fantastic, which is an anomaly, really. But so most of the time when I speak to people, they're very. A lot of people are very scared of, you know, what's to come. There's so much uncertainty, and so now emotional well-being is very much at the forefront, and it's a very interesting intersection, because it's a point of time where, you know, especially you know, parents are understanding the value of education, because now they're having to educate their children at home. You know, a lot of the policymakers are trying to, well, what can we do? We want our citizens to be, you know, at their optimal best. And so right now, a lot of the mental health conversation, you know, making sure that that children can return to school and whether they can bridge that learning gap, is very new for many countries. Whereas, and for us, you know, working in crisis settings, we've always dealt with children that have had all these different aspects and have this huge gap that's already in their education. So we want to accelerate their learning so that they can catch up and reach their full potential. So I've seen it from a different perspective, because for me, I feel like this pandemic has been a real opportunity to reimagine how we learn. Because learning can happen anywhere at any time, and through any mechanism, really. So I'm just reading here. It was pretty stressful. Yes, I definitely miss some parts of my normal life as well. And I do think the beginning was much more stressful. I think also we've kind of eased into this new norm. But what I was saying is, it's a very interesting time, because now I feel like the policy, so all that policy, all that shaping of laws is now being influenced by things that normally weren't on the radar. So just so you know, education, for instance, in humanitarian settings only received about 3% of funding. That's very little. I mean, it's actually much less than 3%. It's more like 2%. So now the fact that, you know, everyone's concerned, we have all these children out of school, how are we gonna, you know, accelerate their learning? Now it's getting a lot more of the attention it deserved. and it'll definitely translate into more funding, more opportunities, more innovative methodology, because, you know, social emotional learning is something that should be integrated into school curriculums, not just in crisis settings, not just in, you know, fancy private schools, but should be a norm, because as we move in to get employed, a lot of the corporations are now looking for these soft skills or life skills, as sometimes they're referred to. So I really do see that this is going to sort of blossom into something new. And I think I'll just stop for some questions, so we have enough time for questions.
And maybe a last one. I'm just asking the next speaker after the break to start a bit later, so you have at least 10 minutes to the break. But one last question, maybe?
Okay.
Anyone? So, oh, I have one for you. If anyone here wants to become an ambassador, what should they do?
Well, I mean, definitely, it depends where you're located, obviously, but you should try going through the foreign service track of your country. So in the States, I'll speak to that because I'm more familiar. You apply, you take the exams, you become a foreign service officer, and you can escalate, of course, through your career. Diplomacy is a really lovely, lovely career, especially since you get to work in so many different locations, and then explore different capacities. So, you know, whether you're assigned in sort of a public affairs role at one embassy, or maybe you're working with policy and other different aspects in another, you'll really come to understand how all those diplomatic relations work and how they come together. Because not one of them sort of goes on its own. It's really almost like a puzzle of connecting those pieces. And then obviously kind of tapping in, you know, if you're interested in advocacy or different things, you know, talk to the think tanks, to the different policymakers, because, you know, there's that, obviously the foreign service track of, you know, a career in it, but it could also come about in different ways just by working in something that's very parallel that could eventually just merge.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning also that getting into diplomatic career, I used to live at an embassy, right? So I know the whole thing quite well. It doesn't mean that you're going to become an ambassador. You could start and then you're second secretary, first secretary, which are very high level roles, maybe even get to the consul, and then you want to join the private sector, you want to start your own thing. There's even an institution called the Independent Diplomat or something like that I met at the Concordia Summit in New York during the UN General Assembly. So a diplomatic career is worth considering, right? So it's something you should have a look at. And I was never given that option, right? Even though I grew up having friends who were ambassadors, I never really thought about that very seriously. And well, maybe I should have done that, right? So when I figured out that I wouldn't be too bad at doing it, it was a little bit too late, but it's not too late for you guys. So please check it out and you know, try to figure out as well if it is for you or not. But let's go to the play break, and Danielle, please join them. I don't know what they're planning to do now,